Welcome to this episode of Talking Notes. My name is Andrew Nemr, and today we have Esther Mun with us. Esther, hi, first of all.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. Esther and I met on account of the Gotham Fellowship, I think it was, or at least tangentially to the Gotham Fellowship, a faith and work program developed and executed by Redeemer Church's Center for Faith and Work in New York City. And we have remained connected in various ways over the years. Esther is a phenomenal designer. I would consider her an artist, but we can talk about that as we go. And is presently involved in a I don't know what you would call it, like the Gather project is like a movement, it feels like. So for our listeners, I guess tell them something about you that would help frame the conversation that we're talking about.
Okay. I would say, well, my background is in design, but I think what energizes me or ignites me is a collaboration with any creatives. So I think that encapsulates what Gather is, which is a creative collective teaching their expert whatever they're expert in a small, intimate, safe settings. So you could call it like a one-off creative workshops that are taught by various creative minds. And I think when that is sparked in a safe space for others to explore and to really discover that they are creative beings is what excites me. And I think even comes to design projects. I love working with different discipline of creatives in the design realm as well. And, when you're on the same page, looking at the same vision, that's just a really easy, fun flow. Yeah. So I would say that's me in a nutshell. Like love collaborating, love meeting new people. Yeah, bringing out what energizes them and then collective force just moving certain things forward.
There's and I'm sure you've heard about this idea, there's like different ways that people kind of operate in small communities, and there are like oracles and connectors and kind of different roles almost that people start to land in. And as long as I've known you, you've been that kind of connector. That person is like, oh, I know you, and then you should know this person and that person over there. And what what drives you for that?
Mm, I think it's a natural connection when something sparks in my brain of, oh, have you checked out this? Or do you know this person? Or the optimal, like full potential of what they're trying to achieve.
Hmm.
Like, I think it's just like a natural, oh, you should meet him because he would help you to get there in a sense.
Hmm.
I don't know what actually drives that. Maybe because I'm an extrovert. Because when I enter into a room,
Yeah.
mine literally goes, "Oh, I don't know these people, and that's weird." Like we
What
should I
happens
don't
next?
understand. Yeah, like what I don't understand why we how come we don't know each other? Like we're gonna change that. That's an
Oh,
extrovert.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
very different. I am definitely on the other side of that spectrum,
yeah, yeah.
especially under stress. Um, so let's double back and talk about Gather just a little bit more. Um, Gather started as a dream.
Yes.
Tell us something about that, because that's, in the creative world, lots of things happen in dreams that actually don't ever make it to real life.
Mm.
Um, but lots of things happen in dreams that do, and I'm very curious about that process. Like, what was that like for you?
I would say what dream I had was in 2019, and I think it was my first time hearing God's voice in dreams. And for some reason, I always hear the voice on my right side.
Oh,
And the voice was very, very direct. And I woke up like, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, and I literally wrote them down word by word verbatim in my phone because I didn't want to forget. And it was one of those things where, the voice said, I gave you raw materials, go make clay. And then in the dream, I said, like what? And he said, mud. And I was like, mud? And at this point, um, like I knew that like I had to wake up and like, interpret the dream and ask for interpretation. So like I'm already asking questions in the dream. Like, you already talked to us in parables. Can you just tell me straight up what this means? And then I had a vision of all these art and writing materials in a specific perspective, neatly organized, all in color yellow. That was a vision, like a snapshot of a picture I had when I said, like what? He said mud. And then when I was like, can you just tell me straight up? And then he showed me a picture and I was like, it is not helpful. And then that's when I woke up. So I think it was my first time hearing a voice. And that started the whole journey of what does this mean? And I think when you dream something, it's not just that one note. It's something also going on in your real, like awakened life, what you're up to, what you feel pulled to work on, what you say no to. So during that time, I think in 2017 or 18, I started to host a monthly prayer gathering for artists and entrepreneurs. And I just casually called it Gather. And I actually shared this dream in a prayer in one of the monthly prayer meetings. And people were chipping in terms of what they thought it meant. And like it was more of a convergence moment of few different things coming together. But I would say that dream was a definite ignition or like a kick in the butt of like, you need to interpret this and figure this out what this means. So that's what sparked, okay, I want to make this monthly gather of all these amazing creatives in one table into a creative something. And what is that? So it took about a year and a half to really figure out what gather is and is now, where because you should be able to say like, oh, gather is blank, you know. And I didn't want it to be like gather is a creative workshops. It's like there are a lot of creative workshops, you know.
okay. Yep.
So for me to land on exactly what that was, it took about a year and a half.
Hmm.
And then I decided to make us website because I wanted to spread the word with people outside of my network. Um, and then, I mean, literally a month later, I got the URL gather.com and that was taken, but nothing is on there. And then I tried different things, and the URL that I was able to log in was call to gather.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting is a few months ago this year, I have a dream dictionary that I looked through, and I just came across the color yellow, meaning of yellow. And the yellow actually means call to action. And I was like,
Interesting.
wait, that's so interesting. Like all the art materials that I
Oh,
saw was all in color yellow. And I've had several dreams where color yellow was highlight,
yeah.
whether it was like a creative space dream or um yeah, a few highlighted dreams that I had was like, oh, that was also color yellow. That was the highlight of the symbolic color in that dream. So I thought it was so interesting that that actually meant call to action because, the URL is literally called call to gather, but call to action is like do something about it. And I think one of the things is it was the reason why I actually pursued it was because it was one of those things where like, oh, if you don't try, then the idea is gonna go to somebody else.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
You
and
had
so
that sense?
yeah, I had this sense. I'm like, oh shoot, if I don't activate this, then this idea is gonna go to somebody else. And so I was like, I want to try it. And I actually thought that like, oh, I think it's like a perfect match with my personality because one, I'm already a connector. Two, I grew up in a setting that was very safe place to make and play. Like my
Okay.
parents were very creative and they were just like, do what you want to do, pursue whatever you want to do. So for me to cultivate this safe space of making and especially for those people who don't consider themselves creative, like for me, I believe that every person is creative.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to invite them in and being like, hey, try this. Um, and I think I was blessed and gifted with setting as a child like that. And that's
Yeah.
why I went to an art school, became a designer, and did all these creative endeavors as like my career.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, you can't make that up. So that's my life journey. That's my experience. So it was one of those things where like, oh, it makes sense that I pursue this, you know? Like if I don't do it, I'm always gonna be sitting around. I mean, it didn't even like cross my mind that I'm not gonna do it. I was like, well, I should try this. If it doesn't work out, then I'll just figure something else out.
Yeah, solid. So there are a couple things that strike me. One is even though you describe it as the first time that you heard kind of a clear voice,
Mhm.
you trusted it. And there's a lot of conversation depending on where you stick your ear uh, around hearing God or listening, like the contemplative practices and whatnot. Um, is there's is there something that you can articulate, which might be a high ask, about the voice that made it trustworthy?
Oh, I think the familiar voice was that he's always asking questions. Or
Oh,
if it's like a very commanding statement, it's very sharp and on point, like convicting, but also gentle at the same time.
hmm,
That's a character that I am very familiar with.
okay,
And it's not like he doesn't know, the divine the voice doesn't know that he's asking me a question. He wants to know what I'm thinking and where my heart is.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's not like when he's asking you like where are you? It's not like he doesn't know.
right,
So usually his voice is very convicting,
hmm,
very true, but very gentle.
hmm,
And I think the word go make and play was very it was very attractive, you
oh,
know? It's like, what do you mean by play? Or make what? You know? Like, and I think you just
uh,
associate that with kids. So for me to hear like, I gave you raw materials, go make play. And in my literal brain, I'm like what? And it's like this really fun conversation or argument or debate or, you know? But
yeah,
usually if it's a convicting phrase or a lot of time it's a question.
hmm,
Like he asks me a question. And as I'm answering often, um, I understand why he's asking me that question.
hmm,
I have like a revelation. Oh, and then it's like it's so kind and so gentle that you just want to bawl your eyes out. Yeah,
yep,
so that's the voice that I'm very familiar with.
cool. And so let me double back. The That voice that you're very familiar with is you heard for the first time when you had the dream for Gather, or
I think that was a like voice directly speaking to me in dreams, I think that was the first one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from that point
Okay.
on, I hear voices too, along with other dreams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So a lot of times you go you go on a creative endeavor, like you take up the mantle to have this journey, and the journey's a journey. It's not necessarily laid out, not always laid out the way that the vision comes at first, or there's things that change along the way in order for a vision to come to life.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced any changes, uh, growth, kind of revelations, specific ones, um, on your journey to bring Gather to life?
Yes. He only reveals like the next stepping stone.
Oh,
He doesn't show me the whole picture because if I saw the whole picture, I'll be like, no, thank you.
really?
Yeah. And
Interesting.
obviously, I didn't know what end of 2022 would look like.
Mm,
But he's always showing me this is your next step. This is your next step.
okay.
And I think he knows, I think God knows us well enough, obviously, that if I were to show you a full picture, you'd be like, oh, Hales, no, I ain't going through that. Yeah. And I think,
So you're saying the full picture in terms of the like the process through.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like he's showing me a picture of like, oh, this is where we're going to be or whatever. But um, yeah, it's, it's really interesting because I launched Gather 2022 as an experiment. And then this year, 2023, was like my full energy pouring into Gather and figuring out like, how could I make this work for everyone who's involved? You know,
Hmm.
financially, growth wise, influence wise, all those. And I mean, you just learn a lot because you're experimenting with different things. And you just don't want to do certain things that are just cool and not smart and wise either. So I think I'm in the midst of figuring that out, but I think the constant search and constant learning and constant like course correcting or pivoting is being flexible is what I've been exercising and working with very different personalities, including my personality. You just learn a lot about yourself. Uh,
Yep.
and I think you just gotta let go of that control. You know, you can't control people, and you can't
Yeah.
make people want to work with you or like you, be your friends. So I think the key thing is basic human psychology is you gotta let them do their thing. You gotta trust them. And the common trust is key to having like a thriving collaboration. Yeah, and just
Mhm.
take it day at a time, you know? Um, that and then I'm just remembering like literally the day before I launched Gather site, the very first Gather site that was gonna go public. Like literally the day before, I was just simply just praying in my bed, and I just started to bawl my eyes out, and I said, "Lord, I don't want to fail."
Oh,
And I was like, "I don't want to fail." And
yeah.
then I heard him saying like, "What does failure look like to you?"
Hmm.
And then I said, "Nobody's showing up."
There you go. Yeah.
And then I kind of sensed he was saying like, "That's it."
Right, like that's your concern?
Yeah,
Just
that's
that?
concerned.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, like just chill."
It's
It's a
it's
luxury.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and Gather has a ton of moving parts. Like you have different spaces and different artists and different dates, and there's a lot of um, dynamism to it.
yeah.
You know, is I guess besides the flexibility, which it seems obvious when you say it. Is there anything else that has allowed you to like work with something that, at least from an outsider's perspective, looks so fluid?
Mm. Um, I think not losing your vision of what gather
Hmm.
is important. And so I think in the beginning I was so stressed out about like I want to grow this number of gathers and this number of attendees and whatever, and I was stressing myself out. And so I think a lot of organizations, especially Gather is not a nonprofit, but especially nonprofit or any organizations that promotes creativity. Like I wanted to make sure that I am making and playing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't actually practice that or cultivate that, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Like what's the point of doing it? Just don't do it, you know? Um, so I'm very mindful of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm not just going with the flow of like, oh, let's try this and let's try that, like a my cloud in the my head in the clouds, but keeping in mind that like, oh, I need to have specific goals for this year, and what is that goal? And what are my two priorities for 2023 and 2024? So it helps me to think like, okay, this is my like rough aim, and this is where I want to focus on. And then I think anything in between, you got to be a little bit more fluid how that happens,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Yeah. But it is hard because you just want to do a lot more things than you can do, especially as a starting organization. So this year, I think I have a clear, more of a clear idea of where I want to focus my energy next year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's actually helpful because then I'm like, okay, let me go in slower pacing, and I think we could get there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that part of the, I would almost call it like a guardrail to the
Mm.
growth of Gather, is that you want to be one of the people who are making and playing as well.
Yes.
And that strikes me as a really interesting and kind of key point for the founder, if you would call it, or like the dreamer of something, to say, I always want to be a part of this, not just the person making the space for other people to do it.
Right. Right.
Um, so I think two things come to mind from that. One is we should talk about little cake toppers.
Hmm.
And before we do that, I wonder, are there specific things that your folks did to create a sense of playfulness in your childhood that you remember?
Um, I don't remember if they actually intentionally did anything that made me, just sit and make things or whatever. I think my mom studied like traditional fan dance, Korean fan dance,
Oh,
and then
wow.
my dad studied acting.
Oh.
So they were very much like, you should do what you love. And so my mom was very observant of her personalities.
Hmm.
So she knew that I was like the fireball bouncing off the walls, like an extrovert.
Great.
Um, but I'm always literally like making things with my hands and like coloring. And I had planners when I was little. I was writing, and I think they just kind of let me do whatever. And I would literally I would act out a lot of things that I wanted to be. Like I wanted to be a first runner-up Miss Korea.
Yeah, I love that. First runner up.
Yep, first runner-up. I was
Cool.
so I would wear like my old headband that's decorated with all these like fake jewels, and I would literally crown myself.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
not Napoleon, right?
yeah, like that, and then uh, like I wanted to be a gymnast, so I would wear a swimsuit and like make a ribbon exercise with like
Yeah.
knitting needles and the ribbon, and I would do a whole exercise in the living room.
Awesome.
Things like that.
So
They were
good.
just kind of like, oh, she's just being her.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of like they just kind of let me do whatever heck I want. And
Yeah.
I mean, my mom was like, if you want to be a designer, you should go to New York. And I was like, I don't want to leave California. But she was like, well, if you want to be a designer, you should go to New York. And that's why I came to New York. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Yeah. It's so my folks also were able to create a space in which I felt very, very free to do
Yeah.
a lot. Like,
Yeah.
even though I started dancing when I was very, very young, um, I played with toys like as much as humanly possible as a kid.
Yeah.
And I have very vivid memories of that playtime. And the toys that I played with as a kid, it's interesting. Like I still have a sense of connection to that area of interest, like cars, Legos, um, GI Joes. So there's like interest in military history and interest in very fast vehicles and interest. I still have my Lego collection here, and I still build when I can. Um, so I find it really really special when parents are able to do that for their child, and then to see what comes
Yeah.
later from an adult who has that playful sense still in them.
Mm-hmm.
Where if they, if they have a dream and they're like, oh yeah, well, this could be possible,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, kind of being overrun by other ways of thinking, or just the idea that a dream's a dream and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so little cake toppers,
Mm-hmm.
we got to talk about them, because I feel like that's in everything that you do, that has been a kind of consistent personal play for you.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think it was always been like a side hustle that I would make and paint with my hands, like basically off of the computer. Because design is
Okay.
often um executed and finished on computers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that like an intentional balance to try and strike something physical, something not digital?
No, I think it was like a natural thing. Like
Oh,
it's like, oh, I need to be off the computer. So what am I doing?
yeah.
Um, and I actually like the fact that it brought in like side cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you monetize that early, or did it start out as something like that wasn't a side hustle that turned into something more serious?
Yeah. So I we were actually selling our notebook line at a flea market, and it was a rainy day, so there were no customers. And at flea markets, only thing that sells is like food.
Okay, so
But I
notebook
saw,
notebook line, is this Little Fury?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
the linkable notebook from Little Fury.
Okay.
Um, so I saw these blank toppers. Another booth was selling it, and they sold like a little, do-it-yourself painting kit. So we were just there in rainy day, like no customers. Tina was next to me, and then I just started painting a topper for my friend's wedding as a gift. So I gifted that set for her cake, for her wedding cake.
Okay.
And then I just started doing it as gifts. And then I started getting inquiries from strangers, like, can I order these? And then that gave me an idea. I was like, oh, I want to make a site because I didn't want to do anything that it was in wedding industry. I'd be like, oh no, no wedding industry, no wedding design, nothing.
Is there
No.
is there a particular reason for that? I have to ask. 'Cause
Oh, I don't want
that
to. Who wants to deal with like, you know, like crazy fights?
I feel like there's
Unnecessary.
I
Yeah,
feel like
unless
there's certain personalities that like go into the wedding industry and like want to make that day something for everybody involved, and then there are others who are like, maybe not.
yeah. Well, I just don't like that we just spend so much money in that one day, which I
Mm,
totally agree that it's special and all that, but I just don't want it to deal with people who turn into high maintenance people.
yeah, okay, yep,
You
sure.
know, I was like,
Lots of stress on that day,
yeah. So
potentially.
I wanted to make wedding cake toppers, but I think what really interested me was um different cultural outfits. You know, like Korean
Hmm.
traditional outfit, Chinese outfit, Japanese outfit, Thailand, like just different countries. Um, so playing around with different types of paint was really fun. Um, so that lent itself to launching a little cake topper site where you could order customized toppers. And I made my like policy very, very strict. Like you're not getting a shot of your progress. You're gonna like what you're gonna get. So you pay up front and you're gonna get your toppers in 3 weeks. And that's it.
Yeah,
And it worked out.
it was really interesting looking at your site. I just launched note card portraits a little bit ago, and these are custom abstract portraits of people on note cards. And I launched the site, and then a little bit later, I looked at LilCakeToppers, and I was like, oh man, that's very direct. Like, there's no there's no ambiguity about like what the process is like and what's going on, and that's not often the case with commissions in the art world. That's not often the case with many custom design things,
Yeah,
at least that I've seen. So kind of a almost a breath of fresh air, frankly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the site that you're looking at right now is very nicer verbiage. Like before this one, it was like more in the attitude of like if you don't like what you're getting, then that's you. And
Oh
my
wow,
writer
that's
friend was like,
amazing.
that's a little harsh. I'm
You
like, okay,
may want to get a copywriter to look at that.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, so you kind of have all these things happening. Um, what are the things that you do that ground you in the midst of Little Fury, a design agency, Little Cake Toppers, uh, a personal making practice and side hustle, and Gather, which is like this huge collaborative platform.
Well,
How do you stay sane?
oh,
How do
um,
you stay okay?
yes. I would say prayer and close friendships.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I actually think it's really important to just wake up in the morning and count your blessings.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's like if you were to die tomorrow, you know what I mean? Like the fact that you could walk out of your house or even, pick whatever food you want to enjoy, that's not given for everybody, but we
Yeah.
just take it for granted. So I think thinking about what's not everything that I have is not given for everybody.
Hmm.
And I mean, I have so many blessed with so many friends and just a lot of resources that I have um that I want to maximize. Yeah. And I think going slow and like slower pacing and not thinking about um oh, I should be here at this point. I think a lot
Hmm.
of times we put our like pressure of like, I mean, I used to do that a lot. Like at this age, I should be making this much. At this age, I should be living here. blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You just make this up. And I think if you operate in a constant mindset like that, I think you're constantly exhausted.
Yeah, it can
Totally
be.
exhausted. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so when I stopped thinking that way, I was more energized to do the work that I needed to do today.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to not to hit like five things today. You know, sometimes they're just like, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I think I need to be painting today, you know? So I like giving like a general goal, but not like a strict goal. So I could kind of ebb and
Okay.
flow, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I think that's stressing yourself out. It's
I'm
like,
I'm
oh, I
laughing
feel
because it resonates. There's there's a sense in particularly in the performing arts industry, and I've had this in myself and also with some friends that there's a feeling when you're in the business of always looking for what's next, right? Because you're never sure that there's going to be a next show or a next
mm,
project. And so you start to develop this cycle of even as you're doing one thing, you're looking at the next thing that you need to do.
mm-hmm,
If it's empty space, you need that filled with work. If it's work, you need to get prepped for that job. Like, and there's this constant
mm-hmm,
thing. And just the interruption of that to have the time and space to think about what you have,
mm-hmm,
to be thankful for that, to then kind of maybe broaden the goal to not
mm-hmm,
just think of the tactical what's next, but think about kind of the if you're if the pace of life is healthy for you, perhaps,
mm-hmm.
or those kinds of things. I think is really really important, frankly, and also uh, seems to be something that is echoing across conversations that I'm having,
Mm.
where lots of friends, and I don't know if this is like an age thing or like a period of life or just something that many people are happening upon at the same time, where the way that we've been living has come to kind of like a I don't know if I want to do this the rest of my life, or maybe I don't feel like this is working continually.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been this interruption to say, yeah, what does it look like to slow down, to shift the way that I make goals or that I pursue certain things in my life? Um, if I can ask, if you're willing to share, because this gets into some things that are really really private. What what does prayer look like for you? Because that's something, in movies sometimes they'll have the character and this is always the image in my mind. It's it's a character that's in a bar, it's like a guy that goes up to a really beautiful looking woman, and they never show the dialogue of the interaction between the two people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what are they saying to each other? Like, what was that first line and what is the response? And you never quite find that out. And I feel like prayer is kind of the same thing. Like for an individual person, the way that they speak to the divine, the way that they talk to God is often very personal. And if it would happen in a movie, it
Mm-hmm.
would be like, the person goes to the place that they want to pray and then the camera zooms out and like you don't hear what they're saying. You might
Mm-hmm.
see them, but you don't actually can't actually know what that is. But if you're willing to share, I think it would be really beneficial for some of the folks that listen and to hear what that's like for you.
Yeah. I think I talk to, or my prayer is literally like talking to like another person.
Hmm.
Like, um, I need your help. I don't know what to do here. like as if like somebody I'm talking to somebody. But you know what's been really helpful for me is asking God what he wants me to do. And my friend shared this with me like years ago. And when she first wakes up in the morning, she asks, what are you dreaming of?
Hmm.
So oftentimes we're telling him like what we want, and this is my dream. This is
Right.
the thing that you
Right.
have placed
Sure.
in my heart, so help me manifest it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So it's asking like, what are you dreaming of?
Hmm.
And I think that changes the whole scale and the magnitude of possibilities in a sense too.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
oftentimes I literally sound like I'm talking to somebody. Like, Lord, that is whack. Like, what the hell is going on over there? Either that or like tomorrow's my birthday, so can I get a nice ass dream? It's literally like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad used to say, um, when he woke up every day, he would he would he would sit and he would say, "Okay, Lord, what are we doing today?"
That's cool.
And then he would kind of just start his day, and the day would unfold
Yeah.
um, from that starting point. Like, yeah, that's it. The there's so many different prayer traditions, and um, it's interesting. I've found myself in conversations in the past where somebody's like, "Well, how do you pray? Like, how do you do the thing?" As if there was an appropriate or right way to pray,
Yeah.
and they're seeking it. And the disciples asked Jesus that question very kind of straightforwardly,
Mm.
um, and finding out, at least in my journey, um, how colloquial, like how casual the
Mm-hmm.
conversation with God can be,
Mm-hmm.
uh, has been like a big revelation. Like all the formalities that the creator of the universe would warrant are not necessarily uh, expected is not the right word. They're not necessarily uh, demanded,
Right.
right? And that's striking. It's
Mm.
like I can hang out with you as a friend.
Yeah.
This is the little. It takes a little bit of an adjustment, and has for me when I first came to that realization.
Yeah. And I think he speaks your love language,
Yeah.
you know? I think that's the reason why I remember my dreams. Everyone dreams, by the way. It's just that we don't remember it.
Okay.
And we could ask to remember them if we want to remember them. And if it
Hmm.
wasn't for dreams, I think that was his way of grabbing my attention to be in the word in a sense. So
Interesting.
I always joke around saying like, man, like as a person of faith, he gave us the word to read and pray and study, but certain people have special needs like me. And he's talking to me in like visual flashcards. Apple,
There you go.
banana.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and
super
it's like
sweet.
it's like it's like a night parable.
Hmm.
And like the way humans are designed, we are curious with those things. And that's how he pulls you in, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, and we want to know. We want to figure out that mystery.
Yeah.
And so I think his most effective way of speaking to me is through visuals, which is at night because he also has my full attention.
Yeah. There are no distractions.
Nope.
Well, and as you're sharing that, it strikes me that it's like that's one way to continue this idea of seeking,
Yeah.
right? And that even in the creative process, like when we when we stop, and rest is a different thing, but like if we stop the seeking or
Mm-hmm.
the work of unveiling the thing that we're trying to make,
Mm-hmm.
the thing stops, right? Like there's a part of the relationship, a part of the activity that is based on our engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that it's just it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to me when aligned to the like seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto you. Like the seeking is a part of the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. It just reminds me of how we have our part to, our responsibility,
Yeah.
Like you have to get up and brush your teeth. Do I want to do that? No.
Right. Depends on the day.
Yeah. But there are a lot of things where it's you gotta take the step.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's gonna make you do that. And plus he's not gonna make you do that either. You know what I mean?
Right.
That love is not genuine then.
Yeah.
That desire is not like genuine place of your heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, really interesting nuance when there the idea that God cares so much about us that he, generally speaking, will not impose upon us,
Right.
right? When quite often, at least for from my perspective, like there's some situations where I remember I would say, no, I would rather you just impose upon me and have me do the right thing
Mm,
than have me try and sit here and figure out what the right thing is before I do it because
yeah.
it's complex, or I don't feel like I have the right tools or the right perspective to even figure out that answer.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it is that's quite the idea to come to terms with or to even float.
Mm,
Um, okay, so conversation very long time ago, you mentioned to me that you did not consider yourself an artist,
yes.
and I'm bringing this up in public because I'm wondering if anything has changed since that conversation.
Yeah. Um, I think I do consider myself an artist. I think it was because I had a very distinctive different definition between a designer and an artist.
Hmm.
You know, um,
What were they?
uh, Designers are problem solvers, and maybe I had a narrow mind of what artist was because I think of, like fine artists or performing artists and
Hmm.
writers. Yeah, I think for me, my brain works best when there is a problem given and I need to solve it
Mhm.
in a creative way. So therefore, oh, I'm a designer, not necessarily an artist, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my personality is um when I'm doing certain things, even if it's like toppers or sketching or something, there has to be a point why I'm doing that. Like I'm sketching because I'm designing a logo. So there is a endpoint or a purpose,
Mm.
like a project toppers because I have an order or I want to gift somebody this thing. I don't think I ever sit and like paint or write because that's what I want to do. You know what I
Huh.
mean? And I think that's very much like an artist mindset
Okay.
versus a design mindset. No design,
Interesting.
not all designers, but rarely any designers sit around and design something for themselves because they just want to design.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm not speaking for all designers like that, but I don't know any designers who are designing because they just want to design. Yes, they could design something for themselves in a way that like, oh, I will have a project that I want to work on for myself. So it's like,
Okay.
what is it? Not like, oh, I want to see if I could lay this out. Like, I don't think designers do that. You know what I mean?
As
Like,
opposed to like the artist sketchbook that's always in the cat's bag and then
yeah,
they're coming out
yeah,
because they see the thing. Okay.
yeah. Like, for example, when we went to Gather Retreat in October, the four other artists who came were all illustrators, fine artists, watercolor artists, and calligraphers, right?
Yeah.
First thing they did waking up in the morning was literally like coffee and sketchbook out.
Wow.
All of them. Like for them, it's like whether they had a project to work on or, oh my God, I have my own time of something like, you know, relaxing or my morning routine or whatever.
Hmm.
Every second I would turn around and they would all be like sketching and watercoloring. And that was their time of being who they are as an artist. Meanwhile,
Wow.
meanwhile, I'm just sipping on coffee, just chilling. Okay. Either that or I'm in the hot tub.
Right.
Just like, this is nice.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
So,
that's a very interesting distinction. There's a there's a clip that I recently saw on Instagram about the they mentioned the creativity gate, right? This idea that we kind of have a gate uh, cognitively in our mind that tells us what is relevant information and what's irrelevant information,
mm,
right? And for hyper creatives,
hmm
that gate is doesn't work. Like it never kind of closes. It's always open.
hmm
And there's always information coming in and there's always that information is always being processed into ideas
okay.
and into things. And if as a hyper creative you've kind of closed the loop and said, okay, my gate's just always open. That's great. I'm having all these ideas. That's great. And I can also act on them and kind of bring them to life.
Yeah.
Then you have a workable system, right? Where you don't get this backlog of ideas that you never bring to life and you're able, the gate kind of functions because it's doing the thing that allows you to bring all this to life.
hmm
Um, I think I think for maybe for different people, for those who are hyper creative or even want to train into that,
hmm
right? There's this practice of immersion into whatever the craft they're into is
hmm
that would show up as, yeah, I wake up in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, and we're doing the thing now.
hmm
Different than uh I wake up in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, and I wait until, a particular time of the day to do my practice, or I'm waiting for a project to come up that I can apply my practice to.
hmm
There's an interview I read a long time ago with Bobby McFerrin, who was on tour somewhere in the African continent at a local village,
hmm
and they came out of the city, took the whole band, like everybody who was on tour, went to a local village just to kind of meet some of the folks who were not in the metropolis. And one of the locals came up to Bobby McFerrin, and he recounts this in the article, and he says, the local asked, "What are you here for?
Mm-hmm.
You're here from out of the country. What are you doing?" He says, "Well, tonight we're going to be singing at the concert hall." And the local just looked at him, had a big question mark, and said, "Why do you have to wait to tonight to sing?"
Mm.
And those kinds of paradigm shifts, sort of,
Mm-hmm.
are just really interesting to me
Yeah.
because I think there is definitely a need to rest,
Mm-hmm.
especially for hyper creatives,
Mm.
right? And I think it's interesting that there that kind of was a defining line for you between what a designer and what an artist is.
Mm. Interesting. I've never even heard of that.
The hyper creative.
Yeah. Like whatever, all the things that you just shared. Um, yeah, I think, when a lot of painters or illustrators, when they discover a new technique that they want to, they want to explore, um, that's probably the only time that I'm like obsessively trying things out. Like, oh my God, I want to try this texture on this thing. Or I
Yeah.
wonder if like certain techniques that I just learned that I want to try, that I need to let it out. Or I feel like I'm gonna forget.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's like the only time when I'm like, I can't go to sleep until I figure this out, kind of thing.
Yeah. Solid.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't think. I mean, I look at my fine artist or illustrator friends, and they're constantly sketching.
Hmm.
Like even the 10 minutes that they're waiting at a coffee shop, they're sketching. You know, um, I will be looking at Instagram.
Right. Yeah.
Blowing my brain out.
I used to get yelled at in school for tap dancing under my desk, and so I've had to like put a dial on that habit.
Uh-huh.
That's the equivalent for the tap dancer is just like you're sitting around and your feet start moving, but you're making noise, and that is not helpful for your fellow study hall folks.
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, interesting stuff. So uh, you've got a lot of things going on. Um, Generally speaking, where can we send folks if they're interested in finding out about any of the things?
I would say calltogather.com.
Okay.
I'm in the process of actually starting to build out design branding arm under Gather Incubator.
Ooh.
Yeah, so Little Fury is what it is now that I've been doing it with design partner Tina. And then I think in Gather, I would love to start building out Gather Incubator, and it's basically branding artists or the products that actually makes an impact. And it's
Mm.
an interesting idea that actually has a great influence on people. So it's like the brands that I believe in and the people that I believe in. Um, and I've always had this idea, and I think I want to start building it. Yeah, because it's like you notice what you do on the side. Even this year, I told myself that I'm going to take a sabbatical from design. It was the opposite. I did a lot of design this year. And all the design that I've been taking on is like, oh my God, that idea is such a great idea. And you need branding. And they
Yeah.
were like, can you help? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, because I think for a long time I thought I didn't like designing. Like I got tired of designing in a sense. But
Okay.
I'm not, there are so many great designers out there. So I'll just work with them. I don't have to be the designer.
Yeah.
Um, but I do enjoy concepting and I do enjoy orchestrating creative collective. And I think that
Mm.
kind of sparked in my brain this week. where creative collective of teaching different creative activities and creative acts. And then the Gather Incubator is creative collective bringing an idea to life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like bringing on people and like being in the constellation, you know? That's why I'm teaching one of the gathers along with other gather artists.
Yeah.
I am designing and branding along with other creatives like strategists and web developers and UX UI and product designers, photographers,
Yeah.
videographers, whatever the brand calls for. So I think I want to start building that out. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And I think it organizes my brain in a very one house in my brain because under Gather, there's LilCakeToppers as a workshop.
Yep.
And then now Gather Incubator is basically what I did in Little Theory, but more of a focused clientele under Gather. So it helps me to simplify all the things that I do in one house.
Yeah.
You know, not like these three entities. That's like just sounds overwhelming. Yeah. Either that or sometimes I just want to drop everything and just snack. That's it.
Yeah. Snack or nap. Yeah. I laugh because it resonates. There's, and we've talked, many, many times about the artist branding concept
Yeah.
because I have very often and almost continually, I feel like I've struggled with that in finding a way to publicly display all the things that I see as completely connected and like almost unable to untangle or showcase separately. But to find a way to do them all at the same time or in the same place without being overwhelming or confusing or any of that uh, has been a significant challenge. So yeah, I feel like only recently have I gotten some sort of handle on that, and that's been yeah, it's an interesting challenge, especially for I think artists who are uh, multi-medium, I guess would be the way to say it. Like they have pursuits in different expressions and therefore almost have different voices.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very typical mind of a creative though.
Mm,
We have 4 or 5 things going all at the same time. Yeah. And that's very, very common.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we're not alone. That's good.
Yes.
Fair enough. Well, I think that's a pleasant place to stop.
Cool.
Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Um, calltogather.com. Check the show notes for information and further places to explore everything that Esther is doing. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.